Hello, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Creatives Chat. I'm Rusty,
I'm Peter.
and we're going to resume our Creatives Chat between Peter and Lauren in our after show convo. Our show shall begin now. Streaming from Retro Earth Studio and brought to you by wearehistorically.com, Conscious Brand Apparel, and
Learn to play jazz piano like a pro, by a pro, with Jazz Piano Pro Essentials at jazzpianopro.com.
everybody meet Lauren.
So I guess in the new moves in the direction you're looking for, especially in the homesteading department, where have these past few months and this really past few years of just transformation and development and growing and understanding, where has it kind of directed you in this new movement, in this new direction?
I will say it's made me a lot more thankful for my family. And the homesteading that I would like to do, I would like to get to a point where my mom can retire.
You will do. You will do. We speak with intention on this show.
I will be speaking with intent. My goals are to have my parents retire. My adopted parents who have sort of been there for me my whole life. I would like to be in a position to get them into retirement and have enough land where they can have their own space, and be able to do my own sort of farm to table concept whenever I so choose.
Ooh.
Perhaps even a bed and breakfast. But either way, I would just like to have a garden and a cow and a goat, and I would like to make cheese, and I would like to sell my fruits and vegetables. And I think I have come to a point where I've decided I need to simplify my life. You know, I am an extroverted introvert. I don't mind being a part of conversations. I love people, but I very much enjoy my solitude. I very much enjoy my peace. And so much of my life has been stressful my entire life, to where I've just gotten to this point where it's like I need peace and quiet and calm, and I need to be in a position to give myself that. So, you know, I think if I was waking up every morning and going and tending my garden, I'd be a pretty happy lady.
Well, that's the fascinating aspect of when we are really going through those catalytic moments in our lives where it peels back so many layers, where we just see that truth of our heart, what we really want, where we want to take things.
Mm-hmm.
It never ceases to amaze me how it always comes back to these simple components of simplicity, immersion with nature and life, and really more so doing things by hand.
Yeah. I think it's interesting to me that the simplification comes from doing things by hand too. Isn't that crazy? Because so much is provided for us these days where you can just go to the store and grab it. People just lose that appreciation for doing things with their hands. And, you know, once you get back to that simple step and bring it into a second nature realm, it's so much more satisfying.
Yeah. 100%.
And I think and it's like you said earlier, I think a lot of people have just really lost touch with that.
So in terms of I always like to think of the solutions in this sense. Do you think it'd be beneficial to have an entire almost year of education, or have it be something that's standardized throughout as you age in school, be focused on the culinary arts? Because then you could actually throw in this avenue of where it's the farm to the table, give people these life skills, really show them, a different perspective of just even the industry itself from a student level early on.
So I would say early education programs that incorporate culinary are incredible for children. One, it teaches creativity. It teaches science. It teaches everything you need to know. Cooking is so much more involved than I think people realize.
Yeah.
And, there's actually tons of great charter schools that offer these programs, I think I would like to see it much more, throughout school systems. I think it would be much more beneficial to all children to know where their food comes from. And you see it all the time when you do get a kid involved with their food, they automatically are drawn to it. They want to know. Kids are so smart. They're so much smarter than we give them credit for. They're little sponges, and any information that you give them, they take. It absolutely blows my mind. I feel like had we had the funding for those programs when I was in school, I feel like I would have been much more drawn to this earlier in my life, and potentially even be better at it than I am now.
Yeah.
And the unfortunate thing is that there's just no funding.
Right. Well,
I mean, schools are already underfunded as it is.
Yeah.
But once you get into, okay, where are we going to put the funding that we do have? The arts and all of that is the first thing to go.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate because art is so moving for so many people.
And I can attest to that because one of my first jobs outside of, like big pharma was teaching like after school classes, and they had like a kitchen available. So they were like, yeah, I mean, like just in terms of like, oh, we want to teach the kids throughout the school year, like, we have a kitchen, like, would you want to teach them how to cook? I was like, oh yeah, I'm definitely making a cooking class. So it was just like basic stuff. It wasn't anything intense. But there was something about seeing them kind of just like being super heads, because it was this age group was teenagers. I believe it was 14 to like 16, 17. And to see their kind of like skepticism and just kind of like their tepid like nature about, oh, I'm in the kitchen, oh, whatever, it's not gonna be anything fun. And then after that first class, when they actually got to eat their food, there was like a switch that turned on at least like 95% of them, where it was just like, oh wow, like you could just see the satisfaction in their eyes when they're like, I made that. It's just like, it's such a simple win that, especially in this age of like all this mental health pressure and just the different aspects of unhealthiness that our society conditions many into. It's just such a simple win. It's just learning how to make your own food, like make your own breakfast food, make your own lunch, make your own dinner.
Well, I will say, as a kid who was starved of those resources and like starved of that knowledge and support for cooking, if there is an outlet for that in another place, that's incredible, because I can't tell you how many kids probably grew up like I did, where, they had no support. They had no one telling them they could, and no outlet or funding in their schools to get them there. So, it all comes back to having that support would be incredible for these kids,
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, in your own experience, you talk about mentorship and having just really these cool relationships with people and that are leaders in your field. How do you feel a mentorship has really transformed your professional and kind of personal life? And just when you had them, the advice they gave you, what's the kind of like real role? Do you always try to push people to get mentors in your own industry outside?
I think I definitely advocate for networking and working closely with your chefs and really trying to tap into their knowledge and get their mentorship. But I will say that's not easy to come by. I mean, chefs will support you no matter what because you're on their team, you're in their kitchen. But unless you show some real gumption and some real drive, they're not going to invest their knowledge in you. You have to earn respect. You have to earn their willingness to put themselves out there for you, and give you the knowledge that you want and need. It actually can be kind of tough. Some chefs won't even let you touch the food. Like it can be challenging. You have to really get in there and do your best every day in order to earn that mentorship. You have to express the desire for it, but you have to be the one to show that you're worth it. So of course, I do recommend that everybody tries to find a mentor in their field, but I will say in my particular field, it's a little harder to come by unless you're really, really driven. And you know, the mentors that I have, God, I wish I could pinpoint any specific like thing that's changed my life, but I feel like, you know, every single one of them has contributed to my life in such a different, meaningful way. It's hard to say this is the one, you know.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
I'm very glad that I got all of them.
Love it. Well, it just comes back to that everyone's a piece of the same puzzle, and when we can exchange those pieces of wisdom, then it's just our picture gets clearer, we understand ourselves more. But that gumption you speak of, that drive, I'm really interested in how that enabled you to kind of push through all these times of just kind of life throwing the haymakers at you.
You know, it all goes back to human connection. Again, like if I didn't have the kind of support system that I have, it would have been very difficult for me to do it. I myself am a very driven person, but there were a lot of times where I was going to give up, you know, I'm not ashamed to admit that, you know, it's unfortunate, but I think we all hit those spots where we get discouraged and there's no way out, or there's no, you know, light at the end of the tunnel. But if it wasn't for my incredible adopted family and all my kitchen brothers, you know, it would have been very hard for me to pick myself back up. But actually, you know, that is a fair point to my chef Aris, because he's always the one who tells me to stop crying. He's the pusher. So.
Well, even in that sense, though, has your relationship with cooking changed this past year? Like,
it has.
I mean,
it's changed a lot.
In what ways? I'm curious.
You know, after my dad passed, I lost a ton of my passion. You know, it just died for months. You know, it was very, very hard for me to say, okay, I can do this, because again, you know, my dad was my driving factor. Yeah. It was very hard to continue to have a passion for cooking when you lose your superhero. But, you know, I just got to a point where it was like, I wasn't eating. I needed to feed myself. And that's what got me cooking again, is I had to feed myself. So, you know, and then once I kind of got back into the kitchen, once I, you know, got the position at Black Valley where I'm currently at, you know, it felt so much like home that it just brought me an incredible amount of peace. You know, it's all in the doing, I would say. It's peaceful. When you're doing your thing, it helps. It's therapy.
Yeah. And it's that cathartic experience where you can get that release and really just and pour your beingness into the moment.
Absolutely. So, and you know, and that came another change in my perspective on cooking, where it just became strictly therapy. And I ended up having just this newfound joy of being in the kitchen again, which was so crazy to me, because I didn't even feel that joyful when I first started cooking. And you know, it's crazy to me too, because I had been rusty for a while. I'd made all these mistakes. I'd forgotten a ton of things. I had oh man, I massacred a halibut. There were so many things that my hands just weren't working right, and I wasn't dialed in as well as I thought I was, but I was showing up and I was so psyched just to be there. You know, it's so crazy. The fluctuation over the past 6 months has been a wild wave to ride.
But when you come out on top of it and you really do try to ride it to shore, that's the coolest thing to see. And Cooking's all about creation. Like you're creating so many new experiences that it changes
Yeah.
perspectives. It's always cool to be
Well,
fascinated.
but then I always like to kind of go back to that quote from Ratatouille, where he says, anybody can cook, but only the fearless can be great. Because it does take a lot of grit. It takes a lot of work. It is hard to be a chef. It's hard to be successful in the restaurant industry and in the food industry in general. Anybody can slap some food on a plate, but to do it really, really well, to really make it something that people come back for, that they really enjoy, that they really care about, you gotta have that something.
Mm. Mm. Excellent. And in your something, how has it transitioned into this new direction of just not only like mental health advocacy, but just overall health advocacy in this coming modern era post the Rona?
Well, being a mental health advocate has been sort of a tough transition to make, because on the one hand, like I said, I work with a lot of people who have the same issues with me. So I have opened myself up to a new realm where I can be there for someone. I can support them in a way that makes sense, because they know that I've been through the same things. But it is also a very soul task, and it does take a lot when you are an empath. And it's sort of it's sort of shifted my focus away from just executing food to really caring about the people that I work with and work for, or that work under me. I think I used to just be like, this is the way it is, and this is it, and then blah 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 blah. But then Corona happened, and I like I said, I've spent all this time with my family. I've become much more compassionate and patient, and I've had conversations with the cooks that work for me that are a lot more kind than I've ever been, which is, yeah, I don't know. I mean, because I see that they are like me, and I want to protect them in a weird way. I think it's made me more of a mother. It's made me the motherly type, I suppose. But I'm a strong supporter for everybody who works for me. I'm a strong supporter for everybody who works with me and under me and over me. And I think it's turned me into this person that's like, I'm here for you.
Yeah. The compassionate wells have opened up fully.
Yeah. It's definitely re-energized me a lot to give more of myself.
That's something that's really it's exciting, yet it's also incredibly validating just hearing you say that, because I've always found that when people come to this point of being happy, right? When we've come to a point of really like self-acceptance and self-awareness, the natural impulse for everyone to do is just uplift those around them. It's never like, and it's this weird feedback.
You want to get them happy. You want to get them where you are. You want to get them joyful every day. I mean, happiness, laughter, all of that, it's contagious. It's a good thing that it's contagious.
And it comes back to that playfulness,
I think
though. I love
that light for other people is a great thing.
It's all we do, though. And I think this is where you can get to so many different like philosophical angles of, is there innate good or evil in people? And in these adult examples, it's the exact same thing we were doing when we were kids. In truth, it really is. We're always about that good time, just helping someone, assisting them, just enjoying the now. And it's funny how we return to that through all of this process of just kind of going away from our truth. And we finally value it, and we're like, oh my gosh, this is what we're doing.
Yeah. I will say a lot of my spiritual come to fruition happened not just because I lost my dad, but because I, at the time, was dating someone who had already come to those realizations for themselves and their lives. And
Mhm.
I like kind of like looked at that and I was like, God, I want to be that comfortable with myself and like happy about everything that I'm doing and satisfied and really caring about myself. Like I want to be like that. And there was a lot of inspiration from that too as well.
Ooh.
When you see someone who already has their shit together, like really having their shit together, and you're like, how do I get that? How do I get what you have? And but then that's how you pass the torch along too. When you're
Yeah.
being happy and making all these other people joyful around you, you're continuing to pass that torch.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the real key here. And I think one of the biggest takeaways of grace for everyone to always learn is that it's that love and those types of compassionate forces spread like wildfire, and there's
Oh
always
yeah.
going to be haters. There's always going to be haters out there, but the real ones always can see it and they value that. And I think that's something that's been cool to kind of see is I feel more people nowadays have that personal readjustment, that humbling experience, whatever it is that's shown them that, yeah, this is what it's been about. And I see more people kind of waking
Yeah.
up to that vibe. So it's exciting.
Well, you could be the juiciest peach in the orchard and somebody don't like peaches. So you got to work with what you have. If somebody don't like it, then screw them.
100%. And that's the realm of judgment that so many of us have been kind of conditioned into naturally with a lot of the societal pressures to we had to learn to dance our own dance. More people are doing that now. So it's encouraging. And it sounds like
It's
you're kind of
exciting
like that.
to see people coming into their own and really just like moving on their dreams. It makes me happy. It makes me proud to see people achieving.
Oh, of course. When you create something and just your first moments of seeing it consumed by customers, like, because I know
Oh,
cooking
I'll
for
stare
yourself
at
when you make a
people.
good.
I'll
Oh
stare
yeah,
at people.
just
I'll
through
stare
the
them down.
kitchen.
Especially if it's at an open kitchen, I'll be like, and if it's not an open kitchen, I will make whatever server took that food come back and tell me if they liked it. Immediately, I'll be like, I need feedback on this right now. I need to know what they said. Did they like it? And I think, and all of us in the kitchen are like that too. We all do that. We all have a habit of just like staring at people until they take the first bite and seeing if they like it or not.
Well, that's the fascinating thing. Well, I mean, you have different palates, so everyone has their own different taste. But like when you can make something that really hits every heart, that's when you know it's like, ooh, that's something special. Like,
Yeah. Well, I think I had a teacher in culinary school who was from Korea,
hmm.
and he was very going back Japanese cuisine. He was from Japan. Sorry. My friend Howie, who was in the house, was in the class with me, was Korea. Different people. But he was a Japanese chef, very like
Yeah.
Japanese cuisine is very technical and they
Oh,
are
yeah.
very fixated on hitting every taste sensation. And
Yeah.
so before I plan out a menu item, before I think of what I want to do, I will first kind of say, okay, what's in season? What do I have available to me right now? And then I will go off of the taste spectrum and build from
Mm.
there. So like I will try to make sure that it has every taste component because if it's well rounded, it's much more likely that it's going to be incredibly appealing.
Ooh. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're getting into the taste wheel. You got the mastery aspect, and I want to bring that back up because when you said that comment of, you're getting your 1,000 hours into this, you're mastering this, you're perfecting that. You go to the next thing, you perfect that, you master that. That's one of the underrated and underappreciated aspects, I think, of those who are chefs and work in the industry is just the practice that they have at some mastery, some form of mastery. I've always found that some of the deepest conversations I've had were people that were in like the restaurant industry and culinary arts because of that. Especially a few chefs that I know, because personally, they're great masters at that aspect of putting your dedication, your hours into something. And usually through their circumstance and the grind of things, it looks like they direct it towards themselves at some point because they come to these like crazy realizations. So in terms of just any type of tool that you use for yourself personally that applies on like every avenue of life, from the kitchen to home to family to personal, like what have been some of your tools that you kind of help empower yourself and others with?
I always use the Marie Kondo method. I always use the Marie Kondo method with every aspect of my life. Does it spark joy? Okay, no, then we're done.
Love it. Efficient.
Like, why would you waste, you have so little precious life on this planet. Why would you waste your time on bullshit? If it sparks joy, keep it. If it doesn't spark joy, move forward.
So in terms of the sparking joy, more so directing that towards the healing, like how's your healing methods changed? Your self-care, your self-love throughout this process in these past few months.
I will say I have been much more kind to myself, much more like in tune with my body and in tune with my needs. I've taken better care of my body and my skin and my mental health in the last 4 months than I have in my entire life. And I think it's come from a spot where it's just like, wow, I have the means to do this now, because I've like I said, been very fortunate to have such a supporting family, and I've been given the grace of time. Because my parents are just very compassionate people, that they don't make me pay rent or anything. Thank God. I love you, Mom. But they're also very they're very understanding. They want me to have my best shot, and they have been incredibly supportive of me doing things for myself. So my mom and my sister have been on me about my skincare and helping me find the best products and really helping me improve myself. And my adopted dad, Jim, has really gotten on me about having my shit together and the timing and the appointments and the grown-up stuff. He's helped me become a much better time management and go-getter kind of person. So I will say that my perspective has changed immensely in the sense that it's okay, everything that's right here, I have to take care of that first before I can go over here.
Yeah.
So it's shifted the mentality where it's I can control this space, so I will fix this space first, and then I'll allow my energy to be spent in this space.
That's a powerful one, especially on that empath level where it's until you really get all the different feedback that's happening internally, it just makes all the other stuff you pick up so distorted and more intensified and just
Yeah. Well, and I will say, I have done most of what I've done in life completely alone. So I was working at 14. When I moved to Seattle, I was pretty much by myself. I lived there for 6 years. I was very self-sufficient. And I never really had the means to sort of look in because I never had the time. I was always supporting myself. I was always surviving. But it's because my parents have given me this environment that I've been able to kind of take a step back and be oh, wow, it's nice to take care of myself. It feels good to be happy.
Who would have thought? But I mean, even that, I feel there's so much shame. There's a lot of shame though, even in just being happy, and I think that's one of those things that I've never seen people, because I work with this with some of my students, where they're still from that point of learning to ask for help and to be vulnerable, that it's just even getting to dance on your own in the kitchen, or just to sing in the car, to feel comfortable enough doing things like that yourself. It's always fascinating to me just how many people we censor ourselves. That's where self-sabotage comes in, and it really doesn't end until we recognize our role in the chaos, right?
I think vulnerability is such an underestimated trait to have. I think it's so much viewed as a weakness that I think people can't look past that that openness and see it as a truly healing spiritual thing.
Yeah.
I think vulnerability is an incredibly positive thing, whether it's through sadness or anger or kindness. Any type of vulnerability can become a positive thing.
Yeah.
And I think so often when you express vulnerability, it's so. What was there was this thing I heard the other day. It was like, people's actions are not a reflection of you. Their actions are a reflection of them. So when people don't respond well to your openness and vulnerability, it's not a reflection of you. It's a reflection of their openness and vulnerability. It's because you can't have a circle go into a square hole. Like
Pretty
you
much.
can't. It won't work. If you're open and they're closed, you can't connect.
Woof. Learned that one multiple hard ways this past year plus.
Yeah.
But I resonate with that one.
Yeah.
'Cause it comes back to that sentiment where, to really grow, we have to first recognize, and that's that act of vulnerability. But you think of all those that choose to kind of bottle it up and throw it in the closet, throw it in the room, and just wait until those things blow up. You only recognize that people manifest all this insanity and chaos and negative stuff in this world purely because they don't address themselves. And it's just like this, man, there's so much more potential in this world.
Happiness comes from within. Happiness comes from within. I can't say it enough. It all has to start here. And I think so many people are not ready to take that journey with themselves or unable to take that journey with themselves. So it can be tough.
Yeah.
Especially when you're in survivor mode. Because if you're in survivor mode and you have to spend all of your time trying to make sure that the world doesn't blow up, your world doesn't blow up, I think it's harder to address those issues. Everybody is a victim of their circumstance, I would say.
Ooh. I mean, I'll expand upon that too, where I feel like, that it's a sense of victimhood that keeps us trapped in a lot of those different ways too, where it's when we don't want to have the accountability or keep playing the blame game or, however else it's going to manifest. So this is what I'm kind of curious, because it's like, from someone who's a survivor or someone who had to experience an intense loss, I feel like anytime you tell someone something that doubts these changes are possible for themselves, they always go, oh, what have you been through? And to me, it's like, yeah, it sounds like you've been through quite a bit to be able to, flex your philosophical weight on that. Just, the proof is where the pudding is. So how do you kind of express yourself in the sense of just, putting through the healing work and the time to really kind of digest life and learn from it and grow?
I think when I'm addressing other victims or survivors of abuse in particular, I always sort of, I divert back to myself before I was okay. And healing is everlasting. There's never a timeline on it. And I obviously will still struggle with it for the rest of my life, because that's the impact that it has, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I sort of divert back to, okay, when I was in this headspace, what did I need? So a perfect example is I was actually, I was speaking to another abuse survivor a couple of days ago, and the biggest thing that she needed was all of the components of getting all of this together was just really overwhelming for her. So it's like, how can I support you? How can I provide you with resources that you need? How can I help you support yourself? Because yes, it's very hard to get out of that victim mentality, but a lot of people just don't know where to start. And again, that's why removing the stigma from mental health is so incredibly important, because a lot of people who have that victim mentality, they either don't seek help because they can't afford it, or they don't seek help because they're embarrassed by it, or they're afraid to be judged. Like, there's so much stigma that surrounds mental health that while I will say, yes, there has to be some sort of level of accountability, there also has to be this moment where you look at these people's circumstances and say, okay, well, we're in a country that provides no mental health care unless you got the money to back it up. we're in an environment that is incredibly toxic. America as a whole is an incredibly toxic environment. The mentality in America has shifted in an incredibly toxic way over the last 4 years, I would say, where, it's stuff that was always present, but now it's more aggressive, and the people who are subject to it are already vulnerable. So it just makes it harder, especially and I'll go back to race. So if you are a person of color, it's even harder to get these resources because you're systemically pushed in a less forgiving situation. I will say that a lot of people who have, the quote unquote victim mentality, a lot of them come from poverty. A lot of them are people of color. A lot of people end up staying in these situations because they don't have the resources. So it's very difficult to say, okay, well, you have to take accountability. You have to be the one to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. How can you do that if you have no access to any resources to do so?
See this? I gotta push back on this because I use the term victimhood and accountability as the sense of truly what creates, the definition and difference between adolescent, a teen, and an adult. Just because in the sense of, victimhood is meaning that it's just like the accountability, the sense of taking your life and be asking for help, putting yourself out there. I think the victimhood, because I experienced it from this angle where it's just suburban area, I had a lot of people who played the victim to their role and they got into really intense addiction. Like a lot of my friends that I grew up with are, heroin addicts, in and out of rehab for years, MIA, just no one knows where they're at. And a lot of it was because of this kind of poor me victimhood mentality where they just didn't want to actually be vulnerable with themselves and hold themselves accountable. And accountability, again, is just honesty in this light where it's in order to create a culture where everyone can feel supported, I think it's the biggest thing here is the stigma aspect of judgment more than anything else, where it's I feel like everyone has to go through this victimhood process before they become accountable. It's just the hero's journey in our lives. But it's that light of do we actually value as a society growth and change and people addressing that they have issues and they want to work through them? No. And it's especially one of the things that I found in the Black community is that there's always a stigma on that, where it's just there's some type of seeing yourself as soft, or I know even getting teased oh, that's just your white side, Peter, hearing that type of stuff, so I think it's one of those things where there's complexities everywhere, but ultimately I'm a firm knower in the strength of humans. I mean, we have so much potential in this world where I really do see a lot of it coming down to that avenue of heroes. I mean, it's a beautiful thing that you said it, and I could feel the sincerity and just the energy from it, of when you said oh, your dad was your hero in that sense of, for the inspiration. That's something that I feel we really just don't have anymore for a lot of people, is they don't really have heroes. And that type of inspiration, that type of direction that we want to take our lives it's a huge one.
Yeah, and again, a lot of people don't have that, especially if you end up in the situations that I was in. Yeah, if you don't have a whole lot of support on your side, it's really hard to come out of that. But I will say that had I not been adopted and not ended up eventually getting that support, I just don't know that my life would have turned out the same. I think it does boil down to, the nature versus nurture kind of argument. I think that there does need to be people in your life that want to help you. Yes, you're a victim, but someone has to tell you, hey, let's fix this, and push you, because how else can you find those resources? How else can you find that support? Especially with healthcare being completely unaffordable in this country.
And not really the right type of mental health. We have a lot of just drugs first over real healing.
I very much recommend actual therapy. actual therapy does help. I think, again, there's so much stigma behind getting help that it's like, okay, well, I'm not going to go to therapy. Why would I pay someone to listen to my problems? There's too much stigma. If we can all work together to remove the stigma from mental health, then I think a lot less people would be victims and a lot more people would be survivors.
100%, 100%. And again, because it's just that vicious feedback loop where those that really didn't get the healing repeat it, and it just kind of remains and keeps going, and we just keep passing those torches of issues and generational traumas.
Yeah, the cycle of abuse will continue as long as you let it.
So that's a great avenue to dive into for yourself, is in terms of kind of ending these cycles, like the past patterns and the issues. I do know that it's always recognized that like healing is a continual process. We're living in this infinite onion where we can just keep peeling those layers back. But you briefly mentioned it earlier, but where's that humility and honesty for yourself? How has that really transformed your self-awareness?
I had to take a hard look at some of the actions that I've taken in my life. Because, I'm certainly by no means perfect. I am no Mother Teresa, that is for sure. I have become a kind and compassionate person. And I do like to think that, I try to, for the most part, make the right choice. But I've made a lot of poor decisions. I've hurt a lot of people. I've done a lot of things that I'm not proud of. And I had to sit down and look at some of those actions and be like, is this who I want to be? Is this the kind of person that I want to be next year, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Do I want to leave a legacy behind? Do I want to be a kind, compassionate person and love the people around me and spread joy? Like I had to take a hard look in the mirror. And the reason I addressed my problems was because I had hurt people that I loved and cared about. Yeah. I think it takes losing something you really, really care about to have to take that hard look in the mirror and say, okay, something's got to change.
And that's the one aspect of life that I feel we have the most, obviously it's a turbulent time, but we have the most confusion because we're not really sure which direction to take things. But it's these kind of upending moments, these catalytic, like shocking points that can project us down a really opportunistic path of healing and growth and transformation if we actually have that kind of courage and humility to look at ourselves in the mirror and really face ourselves. And even that type of like kind of like, I know some people call it like shadow work, but even those types of aspects of like your own inner looking, we don't even really value that as much, because how many times do you get treated by the same people that you grew up with that you haven't really talked with in like 20 years, 15 years, and you link back up and they treat you the exact same way as their last version of you was, where they see you as this one person and they don't do the healing to really recognize and see who you are. So it's a fascinating journey.
Oh yeah, I know what that's like.
We can't learn throughout the conflict. We really come to value the good when we experience the bad. It all just makes us who we are. But you've used it rather than letting it destroy you, which is
I will say, although I have used it instead of letting it get me down, I can't talk crap on people who haven't. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, because I know how hard it is. I know how hard it is. It's tough. It's really hard. Like, there's no reason to stress about so many of the things that I used to be so stressed about. Like, there was times where I would just have these panic attacks over seemingly nothing, honestly, if I had to look back. Seemingly nothing. At the time, of course, it mattered very much to me. But, I sort of just like, does this matter that much? I've been able to kind of create this newfound composure and in myself by just being like, okay, all right, whatever, no one's gonna die, just do it again, whatever. Like, I, I've adopted a whatever mentality where I'm just like, okay, well, here we go, push through. Let's go to the next thing. Let's go.
See, that's a super deep spiritual recognition. We only have control. We have control over. Nothing else really matters.
You can only control what's right here. You can't control anything outside of what's right here.
Yeah.
And so if I can't control it, then why the heck am I freaking out about it? And if I can't control it, why the heck am I not doing anything about it?
See, that right there, though, that is the accountable approach to recognizing life. But I guess that's one of the things, though, is throughout this process, it does sound like you have learned to really turn the dials off to a lot of these different stressors.
So like I cook all day, so I'll bake if I need a cathartic activity, or I'll do woodworking, or I'll knit. Knitting is the new one, so.
That's awesome, though. Well, it just goes to show how things can branch out when you choose to utilize that energy for something creative. And I think that's one of those things where it's like, a lot of the self-sabotage that arises in, the human experience all happens in here. And when we divert that attention and affection away from the imagination towards just like the hands, towards just building something, creating something, that's where I've always found people, like if there's one pattern of those who have kind of flipped a switch in their life, it's just like, okay, what things do they build and create?
Yeah.
That's usually the first go-to.
Yeah, I find old beat up furniture on Craigslist and I flip it and then I throw it in my room.
Love it.
It's nice. It's tedious and involved and I don't have to think about anything. It's nice. Sanding wood, that's it. That's all I do.
Well, that right there just goes to show the difference nowadays versus really this kind of like old-timey. We're coming back into like what really brings the human spirit joy. That is at least what I observe. Everything is grace, so I call them these gracious opportunities to transform and heal and grow. Not everyone really like learns from that. Learn from that. They usually tend to get worse. So, I mean, again, it's always refreshing and validating that there's a lot more people waking up out there to like these deeper truths, because that one is probably the most important. It's like, what are you doing? You're like, why are you showing up? Like, who are you showing up for? Yeah.
I thought I was showing up for me for a very long time. I really did. But I realized after that maybe I wasn't.
So that's okay. So that's probably like one of the questions that I need to ask, because this is a very important one for nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
When you came to that realization, how did you stop the kind of banter that we always kind of get caught up in, that it's just like the talk trying to dissuade you and say that's not it. No, you were doing it for yourself. Like, when did you just be like, no bullshit? When was the realness that came out?
I think after I got hurt. I think after I got really hurt, I sort of I had to take a lot more introspective thought and say, okay, well, what really drives me? What really makes me who I am, makes me want to be this and do this. And that was the moment, I would say. I was laying in the hospital bed after projectile vomiting, and I was like,
well, hey,
I had projectile vomited on a nurse, and I was like, you know what?
This isn't it.
This isn't really it for me, I think.
That's fascinating. And in the sense of, again, to take the inner looking right? I mean, it's just another testament of just transforming suffering into strength, like pain into power. And it's that really cool opportunity to recognize that everything is a grace in a sense, so it's just cool to see. I think there's a lot of people that have experienced a lot of change and transformation, a lot of loss and new beginnings. So, it's been it's been interesting to kind of pick your brain. And I thank you. I thank you very much for being vulnerable with us here on Creative Chat.
Yeah,
Is
of
there
course. Of
so
course.
before we kind of wrap things up, I'm just curious, is there any last little note, any nugget of wisdom that you want to kind of pass on to those who may be experiencing, similar situations of loss and transformation and just transition?
The most important bit of advice that I can give anybody who comes from the same background that I come from, or is in the similar situations that I'm currently in, is to be kind to yourself. Just be kind to yourself. Be patient with yourself. Look within. Don't hyperfixate on the world around you. Hyperfixate on what can you do to love yourself that day, because if you are giving yourself the time, if you're loving yourself, those realizations come a lot quicker.
Well, I'll just say that was an amazing after show. And again, Lauren, I just want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experiences with us. I know you left us with one juicy piece, but in terms of we'll gear it towards the kitchen maybe this end. In terms of those who are aspiring to become chefs and really, run their own restaurant one day, what's your biggest piece of advice?
If you really want to be a chef, if that's the path you want to go down, be open to learning. Never be arrogant, be humble, just absorb information, because the amount of time that you're in the industry doesn't exactly equate to your absorbency. So be absorbent, be a sponge, get out there, be willing to learn, be willing to keep your mouth shut, write everything down, just really absorb everything around you, because it doesn't happen more than once.
Ooh, I love it. I love it. And again, with that, Lauren, thank you so much for joining us on Creatives Chat. Listeners, thanks again for tapping into another show. Tune in next week. Roll the outro.
That concludes this episode of Creatives Chat. Thank you for watching. Join us every Thursday at 3:33 p.m. Pacific Daily Time as creative minds get together and chat about who knows what. View more episodes on our YouTube channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks again to our sponsors for making this show possible. Thank you, We Are Historically, for your conscious human apparel. Shop online at wearehistorically.com.
Hi, I'm Darius Wilrich. I'll teach you everything you need to know about playing jazz piano like a pro with my 12-week online video course and downloadable guidebook, Jazz Piano Pro Essentials. Enroll today at jazzpianopro.com.
Thank you for joining us. Have a happy always.
Yeah, that was a solid one.